to Crypto Clothesline. We're glad to be here with you. Hanging out the crypto laundry. Getting all the crypto info for you. Crypto Clothesline. Crypto Clothesline. Here comes the money.
Here we go.
Here comes the money.
The money season on Crypto Clothesline podcast.
Ross Ulbricht is serving a double life sentence without parole for all nonviolent charges for creating a website. Please help free this peaceful man. Go to freeross.org and sign and share the petition.
Good morning, Amy Rose.
Good morning.
How are you feeling? How's the bug?
Pretty good.
Pretty good in a
So
snotty.
amazing.
So good in a snotty downloading kind of a way.
Yeah. How are you?
I'm pretty good. We've had a pretty huge week over here in WA, as you would have seen on our Telegram chat. We had an awesome interview with the ABC.
And you were so good. Like, so good. You did amazing. And we need to put that in the show notes, that interview on the ABC. And oh my God, how did you get to talk for that long? Because people on the radio do not want you talking for very long, but you were on there for ages.
We were on there for an hour. It was. I got approached by Molly. So do you remember we did the talk in the Herald? Oh, Molly did a piece on the crypto clothesline for the Fremantle Herald, and then we've got nearly 20 businesses now in Freo. So I just flicked her a quick message going, "Hey Molly, where to shop with crypto? We've now got 20 businesses, give or take, in Freo. There's some really big names that are just on sort of negotiating to come on board, including some like really big funky hotels, Fremantle, Cottesloe, Rottnest, Northbridge, YHA Australia are now in conversation with us. That's 62 youth hostels across Australia.
Oh my God, that'd be amazing. Because the whole Where to Shop with Crypto, your business, yours and Sophie's business, is all about bringing tourism back to Freo. And to do that, people need somewhere to stay. And I was thinking, you can have a shoe shop and you can have, different businesses like an accountant, but what you really need is you need travel experiences and places to stay. So if you can get some hotels, that would be awesome.
Well, yeah, the hotels is one, and they're sort of groovy drinking halls as well, but there's very sort of upbeat, funky boutique style, but also we've got a luxury yacht that we had a bit of a party. So
I saw those pictures. No.
It was so much fun. And because it was the middle of winter, people are like, I'm not coming down onto the boat. So the people that did come, we actually had a relatively small number compared to whoever booked. But oh my gosh, we had so much fun. We were spilling out into the jetty. There was a live musician. He was a busker that someone had invited because he was playing outside the Fremantle markets, and one of the guys' wives from the boats just said, he's so perfect. So these guys just put on the most incredible spread. The guys down from the yacht is called To the Islands, and Carl and Steve are the owners. They were so grateful for the fact that we were helping to sort of soft launch their charter business. Yeah, so it's pretty cool. It's getting a bit of a buzz. It's getting a bit of a groovy feeling. So basically all that, I sent a text to Molly, and it was probably the most relaxed media release in history. But it's basically saying, hey Molly, this is what we're doing. I reckon this would be really cool. And she just said, wow, we would love to have you on. And there's a show that goes for an hour. It's called Focus. And they went deeply into what is crypto, and the texts and the call-in for those of you that get a chance to have a listen. But literally late afterwards, Molly was scrolling through and showing me hundreds of texts, and they were pretty polemic. There were some pretty upset people out there. So,
Really? What were they saying? Well, upset about crypto?
On the whole, I think, we talked about the elephant in the crystal shop, like crypto scamming, the fact that crypto wants to avoid regulation. One person just said, all you guys just want to avoid paying taxes. And we're like, oh, if only, not at all. Crypto is so heavily regulated. It's losing its sexy, decentralized feeling, So Yeah, it was. It's been pretty hot over here in WA lately. I think we all need a little bit of a break.
I don't know. I sort of wish that I wasn't listening to you when you were alive, but I would have loved to have sent anonymously some interesting questions just to make you a little bit hot in your seat. But I didn't get a chance. It was so much fun.
It was really good. Yeah.
Speaking of hot seat, we had Andreas Antonopoulos for part 2 this week. And in the interview, we talk about what is money. And it's my favourite part because he literally says even animals can understand that money is actually a language and that they share common meaning and value. And so different objects to animals like apes and birds, they use things like berries and tokens and shiny things. So it's not far off to say, and Andreas talks about it, that money is actually just a language.
We live in the planet of the apes.
I don't know. I really liked his example. He said that monkeys recognize the value, but then studies have also shown that animals have, they recognize the value of money, but then they recognize that they can do other things for this money. So they invent prostitution, and then they go on to violence and cause problems because they're trying to get this object of value. So there's all sorts of different intricacies that go on as well. It's really interesting.
This is fascinating. Economic researchers at Yale figured out how to train capuchin monkeys to understand and use currency. Okay, Lewis? The result is that very quickly the monkeys started using currency to buy sex from each other. The most distinguishing trait of money is the fact that it can be used to buy just about anything, right? It's currency, it can be exchanged for all sorts of goods and services.
You can buy politicians.
You can buy politicians, you can buy
elections.
You can buy elections, you can really buy
anything.
just about anything with money. So this is just incredible because one of the researchers, Chen, who was involved in this study, saw out of the corner of his eye that a monkey was exchanging money for sex. The monkeys were taught the concept of money and how they could exchange the currency for stuff, and they basically ended up behaving exactly like people. They taught how to use money to the monkeys, and they responded the same way as humans do, very rationally to incentives. They responded very rationally to gambles. In other words, when presented with gambling options where you can double your number of grapes or you lose half the grapes, people were much more risk-averse when it came to losing, but much more open to risk when it came to the possibility of winning, right? Exactly the same type of analysis that we see when we look at human decision-making.
Right.
Okay. So then it turns out that a monkey accepts this currency in exchange for sex, and then the capuchin goes and exchanges the currency he received for providing the sex for grapes.
What it kind of makes me think of is the fact that we think we're so evolved as a species and we think we're so clever, but in reality we're just kind of a couple of shades of grey away from that whole analogy. Like if apes and things are trading shiny objects and beads and what have you, or berries or what have you, and then it leads to jealousies, or it might lead to prostitution and then jealousies and then conflict. It's just an absolute replay of what's going on in our daily life on a daily basis.
Yeah, except the value that is put on our money is projected by our governments. And that's when things get dodgy. Like if you have this much money, then you get this, and we're the government and we'll tell you how much this is worth. And I don't know, it makes it even more sinister when you think about exactly who makes the money and why they make the money. It's not just berries and tokens anymore. It's literally a control mechanism. That's why I love crypto.
Yeah, I was going to say the thing that really does my head in is this notion that we're also asleep, that we're not even aware that that's going on, and so we're enabling this behaviour on a constant basis. I mean, it was back in episode 1, but he talked about sanctioning your government and vying for change and hustling. But it's part of what I wrote about for the blog in week 1 is like, honestly, how many of us in the dull roar of our daily life get ourselves excited enough to be able to get up off our bums and go and refuse a certain law like the surveillance laws or the anti-encryption laws that came through. So it's a tricky one.
I just don't think that many people do have that fire in their belly to fight because everyone's too busy with their lives, and that's also just That's how the world has evolved. They sort of, there's distractions and there's busyness. So you really don't have any other option but to just continue with the daily grind. Who has time to rally against something?
And energy and money and... However, that's not to say we don't do it. This is part of what we do at the Clothesline, is bring things to people's awareness. So, more people listen to the Clothesline, more people get aware of information, and more we're sowing the seed of change, Amy Rose.
We did mention the Kardashians. Could you ever imagine talking about the Kardashians? Clothesline with Andreas Antonopoulos.
Now, speaking of keeping your clothes on, so with Andreas in the second part, we also talk about the blockchain trilemma, that a concept that Vitalik introduced, the co-founder of Ethereum, and the issues connected with scalability, decentralization, and security.
Yeah, so basically there's a few cryptos, I'm not going to mention their names, partly because I can't remember them. And also there's lots of people who are saying, guess what? We've got the ultimate cryptocurrency because we can achieve the three things that no other cryptocurrency can achieve, which is scalability, decentralization, and security. And Andreas is saying, like, that's the blockchain trilemma. You can't actually do that. And if you do say you can do that, guess what? You're a liar. So basically he's saying, if you have a crypto, you should probably go for decentralization and security first, and sacrifice or make a trade-off for scalability and try and scale in some other way on your second layer.
There's a lot more that we covered off in the second episode too. We were supposed to cut off at 30 minutes, and close to an hour we were still chatting away. So we had a really good chat with Andreas, and we look forward to him coming back on the Clothesline sometime.
And he said that he was going to as well.
Wait woo, wait woo.
Let's have a listen.
Andreas, I wanted to ask you, and it might seem like a sort of a no-brainer given everything we've been speaking about, but we are doing the money season, and I wanted you to talk about what money is, in your opinion, in your understanding.
So I think the best way for me to understand money is to think of it as a language. Money doesn't have value. Money is a symbol for a value that you can get with it. The value is in the product or service or thing you exchange money for, or that you provide in order to earn money. The value isn't the money itself. The money is simply a way to symbolize and express that value in a way that's universal, that everybody understands, that everybody values equally. And that's what language is. Language is a series of symbols that allow us to share common meaning that are universal, or at least universal within that location or culture, and that allow us to convey meaning. And in the case of money, it's a specialized language that allows us to convey value. It allows us to convey what we value and how much we value it, which then allows us as a society to allocate resources based on that understanding. So it's a form of speech. It's a symbolic language that emerges not just from human species, but also from non-human species. We've seen several species can be taught money, and some actually figure it out or use tokens themselves spontaneously. I mean, like animals swapping shiny things and using them to strengthen social bonds or express loyalty to one another or things like that. Birds do it, apes do it, primates do it, some types of mammals do it, fish do it. So it's a fairly common thing, and you can teach animals to use tokens for value. In fact, there's a fascinating open source project where they teach crows to collect bottle caps or cigarette butts or whatever and deposit them in an ATM that gives them treats. And what's interesting is secondary effects like crows exchanging cigarette butts with each other, because they know that then can be used to get a treat, which means now they're treating it as money. We've seen that with primates. You can teach chimpanzees to exchange shiny tokens or beads or pebbles or things like that for bananas, and then they learn that if they collect these or exchange these with each other, they can express value, because then you can redeem them for bananas. Yeah, I mean, basically money emerges in many intelligent species. And of course, it emerges most sophisticated among humans. Once you realize that money doesn't have value, but it's a language, then you realize that the ultimate expression of money as a language is in completely digital form that can be exchanged without intermediaries or a publishing system or rather through an open and public system. And that kind of intangible digital form, just like we do with words when we publish articles on the web, we publish Bitcoin on the Bitcoin blockchain, then money takes its real symbolic nature. You cut out all of the intermediaries, you cut out all of the unnecessary layers, and you make it simply a digital symbolic system that can be transmitted over any communication medium. It becomes extremely robust to interference because it's very decentralized. There's copies of it everywhere. And turns out you don't need a government to bless it with value. And, history tells us you never did, but the type of money we use today appears to be gaining its value from the blessing of the government. In fact, it gains its value because we use it within an economy. And we see that no matter how many blessings a government gives, if the money is no longer used in the economy, it turns into toilet paper, colorful toilet paper, but toilet paper in value, and then it drops below toilet paper because it's too scratchy. And it then drops below goat shit, as the famous quote from a Zimbabwe merchant was. They asked him, why don't you burn it? And he said, because goat shit burns longer. And so at that point, when your money has deteriorated to the state where it's not even goat shit, and at the same time, the Zimbabwe government was declaring and blessing the value of it. So if they were failing to do that, you've got to think, well, is it really the blessing that gave it value? No, it was the use. And once the use went away, no blessing is enough to make it work. And the opposite, money that has no blessing from anyone, that has no decree or fiat behind it, can easily gain value through use and become a desirable, tradable symbol for value, whether that's a commodity, as has happened historically with gold, silver, and things like that, or a digital intangible like Bitcoin, which has only happened once so far. But it happened enough that the theory has now been demonstrated.
That does sound really interesting, especially in regards to the animals. What came to mind when you were speaking was the exchange of bananas.
Well,
somehow.
Yeah, as you see, the thing is, what's interesting is that's not the only behavior that emerges, and I've made this joke before, but if you look at the studies of teaching primates how to use money, they almost immediately and very spontaneously invent armed robbery, so beating up another monkey in order to take its tokens, right?
Is there a YouTube video on this?
Yeah, you can find the research. It's very, very well done. It's been repeated multiple times at different places. They also invent prostitution, so the exchange of sexual favors for tokens between males, females, and all other combinations, well documented. Once they figure out this thing has value and they want to have it so they can get bananas, they then figure out, what can I trade for it? And very quickly, for bonobos, sex is the go-to. For chimps, violence is the go-to. And depending on how the society is structured, they might use a bit of both. And so they immediately invent other secondary behaviors that we associate with money, not necessarily good behaviors. But they also invent giving favors and rewarding and gifting. So a lot of the social behaviors that we do around money are replicated in other social species.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially that build-up of status.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
I just find this world hilarious. Just as a spectator, watching governments, watching the crypto community, going to events, talking about those animals, it's even better.
Well, speaking of animals, I've got dogs howling outside. This is just so perfectly timed. Thank you, canines.
I love it. It gives the podcast a kind of homey feeling. I like podcasts where there's babies and dogs, and I have some ambulances going by here, so it makes it much more approachable.
Yeah, we had Amy Rose's baby who was homesick one day, and we had to do this interview, and he just came right on and let it rip, and I was like, it's okay, it's cool, it's just part of what we do, we're mothers.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know, Amy Rose, if you've got a question. I just wanted to ask about scalability of Bitcoin. You mentioned it before, and we saw in December 17 that it was so slow. And people are now suggesting in some circles that it's becoming defunct and outdated. What are your thoughts about Bitcoin for the long haul?
I think in many cases the defunct and outdated is driven by a very specific agenda, because usually they have in mind the perfect replacement for which they have sufficient investment. But there's also many people who genuinely don't see how this can scale. And the truth is that cryptocurrencies, open public blockchain-based cryptocurrencies, do not scale efficiently. They're difficult to scale. And the reason they're difficult to scale is because this is an important trade-off. It's a very deliberate trade-off. If you want very fast, scalable, database-like behavior, you can engineer it. What you're trading, however, is decentralization. So open public blockchains, especially ones that have decentralized consensus algorithms with thousands of participants, will suffer more from scalability problems than more centralized, more closed, federated systems where you have fewer participants in consensus. The difference is, of course, that means that the more centralized ones are easier to censor, they're easier to disrupt, and they're, of course, cheaper to run and more efficient in terms of capacity. So that's a trade-off. Now, some people will tell you that there is no trade-off, that you can have both, that you can have all three. In fact, famously in this space, we call this a trilemma. A trilemma is where you have three choices of which you can pick two. And the blockchain trilemma, I think this was introduced by Vitalik Buterin as a concept, but it's fairly widely understood now, is scalability, security, decentralization. Pick any two.
Okay.
Right? So what do you want your system to be? And a lot of people who say it's outdated, we have a better solution, look how scalable it is. What they're not going to talk about that much is what they sacrificed. Because they either sacrificed security or they sacrificed decentralization or both in order to achieve that scalability. But it's not possible to have all three. At least that's the prevailing theory. We might find new solutions. So in that case, if it's not possible on the first layer to have all three, which two do you need on the first layer? In my opinion, security, and privacy is a big part of it, and decentralization are the key things you need in the first layer, because you can actually do scalability in the second layer.
So I was actually going to ask if all three can be achieved, because some people are saying that they are achieving all three. And I was always like, are you really?
Yes, you should be very skeptical. I mean, there are reasons why you can't achieve all three within a single system. And engineering trade-offs are real. If you don't think they're real, you're either not cognizant of the actual engineering decisions and trade-offs that need to happen. And that's common. People are like, I don't understand the choices, therefore I don't think there are choices. That's okay, that's fine. None of us understood the choices until they became more obvious, right? So we've all gone through that journey, and it takes a lot of reading and learning and understanding. We're constantly learning about what the trade-offs are and how to best choose a path between all of these decisions. But there is also an element of dishonesty in that some people understand very well what the trade-offs are, and what they want to do is persuade you that there are none.
Well, it's hard out there, because when you come into this space, you are led by, I guess, whoever has the best marketing at the moment, and they'll just say whatever they want and lead people astray. So yeah, it is a bit of a worry, actually.
Yeah, but the market has a way of discovering the truth in a both very direct but sometimes very brutal manner, meaning that if you follow the lie, there's a good chance that you will then lose your money because the market is not following the lie. Or maybe it does for a short time and then it stops, right? So eventually the market will converge on the truth, because it's an efficient mechanism for aggregating the decisions and opinions of tens of millions of participants, at least 10 million participants. And so if the market says, no, I don't think your revolutionary coin is actually going to overtake Bitcoin. You're not the first to come up with that brilliant idea. There is a whole heap, a graveyard of pretenders to the throne, or Me Too, second attempt, we're better than coins that have failed to demonstrate that they're better than. And there's the other thing is, of course, there is an enormous early adopter or first mover advantage, meaning, or the network effect, as it's called in the crypto circles, meaning that you don't have to be better. You have to be much better. Because if you're only a bit better, and at the same time unknown and small and easy to attack and not scaling everywhere and not available for merchants, etc. And Bitcoin is not as good, but it's a bit worse. But it's a household name. Everybody knows about it. There's the highest number of merchants, the most exchanges, the most liquidity, the most pools, etc. Then you always lose, right? So differentiation is very difficult in this space. If you differentiate only a bit, it has to be a lot better or you fail. If you differentiate a lot, then you start occupying a different application space and you become specialized in something else.
Mm-hmm.
And this applies to all the successful chains or even the medium successful chains. The moment they demonstrate some level of success, 10 imitation better than 2.0 versions pop up. And they're like, we're coming for you.
Yeah, it's very aggressive in many ways, which is healthy, that sort of competition, because it's always giving space to new creative outlets and ways of solving problems. But it becomes...
it's very healthy because this is a really true free market. You can, by downloading a new set of software, switch. And there's enough exchanges of liquidity that you can transfer your value from one to another with very little loss. And so this is a very free market for testing these ideas, and it's very competitive.
I think it's interesting too that, it's competitive and yet it's such a quagmire for somebody coming into the space. I mean, you sort of, if you're new to the space and you learn that there's over 10,000, I believe there's more than that now, so-called altcoins and what have you out there, shitcoins known by another name, it can be just so confusing that people do tend to anyway get steered towards the big ones that they know best, Bitcoin and Ethereum.
And hold on to your hats because we only got started. I did a talk in 2015 where I talked about currency as a language. And my prediction then, and there was no strong basis for that prediction then, was we're going to have thousands, then we're going to have tens of thousands, then we're going to have hundreds of thousands. And I might, if I revise that prediction, I might add millions. There will be a proliferation. Yes, because the fundamental question is very similar to how many dialects of a language can you have, or how many different religions can you have, or how many people can be bloggers, or how many people can be podcasters. And the answer is, at first, only a few, then hundreds, then thousands, then millions. Because once you democratize the means of production of these things, and you make it very low cost for someone to enter and compete in this market, which it now is. Anyone with a minimum of technical skill can bootstrap a globally accessible, open, borderless, censorship-resistant, verifiable, secure currency that scales at least as well as Bitcoin, which isn't very well, but good, and launch it at any point in time and call it whatever they want. And that capability is getting so easy that even in 2015, there was already a website where you type the name of your altcoin, you select a few of the key parameters, you press a button, and it builds you a software client to run, to launch your coin. And with Ethereum and ICOs and ERC20 tokens, that became even easier. At this point, we're getting to the point where a 5-year-old will be able to do it using a website. And Tommy Coin will launch to great success in the local kindergarten. And for a while, it will be used to gauge the popularity of Tommy. And then you multiply that by every human on the planet. And yeah, it's like asking the question, how many podcasters or bloggers can there possibly be? And the answer is simple, all of us. Mm-hmm. You have to change. There are no gatekeepers anymore. We're beyond that. We've opened the door. And now everyone who wants can step through that door. There used to be a time when you had 4 TV channels. How many can you have today? How many programs? How many videos? Infinite. All of us. The same thing happened with currency. It's going to take a while for people to absorb that. It's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's just a thing, right? I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm just saying that's the way it's played out. And of course, other than the 3 friends that Tommy has in kindergarten, nobody cares about Tommy Coin, and it has no economic value. It's only a popularity token. But there's a role for popularity tokens and reward tokens and loyalty programs and company equities and sports fans and music groups and fundraisers for specific events, and all of these things can be tokenized. And every individual can decide to tokenize themselves to make a brand. So my prediction is many people will, and many organizations will. There's no limit to this. And 99.99% of them will not be particularly interesting outside of a single group or culture that derives social value from them.
Yeah, it's the value, isn't it? It's the collective value and what can be attributed to that, what can be exchanged.
Right. We've blurred the line between what is money with true economic value, sound money, and what is only a social token of popularity. And that's very confusing to newcomers, but the market tells you very clearly which one is which by valuing them accordingly.
I've been trying to tell people that everything's going to be tokenized in the future. So I'm going to be spamming everyone with that little section of the podcast, definitely.
People get very upset when I say this thing because they say, well, there can only be one that's real money. Well, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying that won't stop people from doing more stuff that isn't money. And not all of it is scammy. There are other values than monetary values. There are social popularity values that do not make sense to anyone who's not part of the in-group. You know, watch some Bravo TV if you want to figure that out. I don't know how to explain it to you. I don't understand why anyone pays attention to the Kardashians, but the point is, to their fans, a Kardashian coin would be valuable.
Yeah, absolutely.
God knows why. It's horrifying as a concept. But, again, that's the difference between this is how I think it's going to play out versus this is how I want it to play out, or this is what I think is good. I'm not saying this is good. I'm just saying this opens the door to a whole spectrum of expression, some of which will be brilliant, some of which will be abhorrent, and everything in between. We've made money, tokens, currencies, and everything that looks like those things a new channel for human expression. And so then the question becomes, how wide can human expression be? And boy, can it be wide, right? That's where it gets interesting. So once you think of this as a language, as a means of expression, then it becomes a bit more palatable. Then you can say, well, you know, even languages that only have two speakers have value to those people. And that doesn't in any way diminish English or Spanish or Mandarin from being dominant, important, culturally influential languages. The fact that there are thousands of others doesn't remove anything from the ones that are that have billions of speakers and change whole cultures. And you're not saying that they're equivalent. You're simply observing, or I'm simply observing, the fact that we will have that diversity of expression.
I do know there's a family who's going to be tokenizing their contributions, you know, with the kids and stuff. That's really cool too. And small communities over here who are trying to implement cryptocurrency within just, you know, a small community of 4 or 5 families. So I actually see it as it already exists. It's here right now.
Yeah, it's going to be very difficult for small economies to bootstrap local currencies in defiance of monetary and economic realities. And in that way, I do agree very much with kind of the Austrian economic approach to money that says, if you do have direct competition between a narrowly used marginal local currency and a universally accepted, strong, robust monetary policy, sound money with very predictable issuance, the sound money is going to win every time, at least for the function of store value. Very soon thereafter, probably as the function of medium exchange, because everybody will want to use that because they want to hold it. And finally, as units of account, as its use becomes broad and universal. So I do agree with that. Not everything can be money, and there can't be too many useful monies because there is a very strong convergence on universal value. One of the reasons we don't have conversions to one currency today is because there are barriers, nationalistic borders that force the world to break into all of these different currencies. And the closest we have to a universal one is the dollar, which is problematic in itself. So the idea of using tokens for local barter or for bootstrapping a local economy, that only survives in extreme scenarios of isolation or economic collapse, where you have to revert to more barter-like behavior. But as long as you can gain access to sound money, there's no reason to do that. You would much rather use the sound money. The reason I see tokens emerging is not for that use. It's for loyalty and popularity expressions, not for pure monetary expressions. For pure monetary expressions, I think there's very little competition, meaning that once something achieves that position, it's very difficult to compete.
Having said that, though, Andreas, a couple of years ago, like I have no family around, directly when I was living 5 hours south, and there was a group of mums and we would exchange babysitting tokens. And this is way before the day of Bitcoin or anything, at least before I knew about it. And so that had immense value because none of us we didn't want to pay a babysitter. We had the time and we had the expertise to take care of each other's kids, and we had the trust. So there were three important value aspects. And
right.
So I'm wondering, in that context, a little babysitting token in a trusted group within a certain community could be hugely of value, independent of the Australian dollar in this case, independent of the dominating, monetary recognized, whatever the word is.
I would suggest that what you can do is if you have a group like that, which is a closed group, and you have trust among its members, and not only trust, but its members, and you decide, listen, I'm only going to accept babysitting tokens from these 6 other people I know who were engaged in this community activity. Why not use Bitcoin? Why not say an hour of babysitting is 1,000 Satoshis? What's its monetary value? Almost nothing. But rather than bootstrapping a whole other token system, you can use a nominal small amount, effectively discounting only for the participants within your group, so you're not feeling you're out of pocket, right? And you can do that in a society where even you have very poor members who are undercapitalized, and you basically set an hour of babysitting at 1 cent, compared to the national currency exchange rate, but with the important restriction that you will not accept to do that for anyone who's not part of the group.
Yeah.
Essentially, you're now using this subdivision of Bitcoin for that purpose. You don't have to bootstrap a new token. And eventually, you could actually calibrate the value it has to the group so that you could earn money that you can use in other scenarios, so it's not restricted.
That's true.
So again, it's actually very difficult to make the case for that kind of use of a token, because you could just use very small denominations of Bitcoin once it's available everywhere. Well, once it's easy to use for a broad variety of people, there's no reason you would build your own token for that.
There isn't really, but people still do it, and it is quite fun, I have to say. Like, I've got my own token.
That's the thing. So what you're saying is popularity, social value, strengthening of social bonds, in-group communication. It's almost like a meme. And that value is not monetary value. It's all of the social value that comes from having that close-knit group. And you use the token to identify and magnify that social behavior. Great. That, again, at that point, it's not monetary value, and that's fine. And those are the use cases you'll see.
Well, thank you so much, Andreas, for joining us today. We have gone on a little bit, might make it into a 2-part series if you don't mind.
It's been fantastic.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
I've really enjoyed the organic way that the conversation has flowed, and it feels just like a chat around a coffee table. I feel very deeply honoured. Thank you.
You're very welcome. It's been my pleasure to be on the show.
Thank you so much, Andreas. Well, I hope you have a lovely evening if it's evening over there, and we shall let you know once it's all produced and when it will be going on air.
I look forward to doing this again some other time.
Oh my God, you just locked yourself in.
Next time we get the video stuff out, because Andreas started out with all the video stuff ready. Amy Rose, there was a slight miscommunication.
If I know it's audio only, I can adapt to that. It's sometimes it's just less set up.
Oh, absolutely. That's why we do it, because it's 7:30 in the morning here. You probably don't want to see me on video.
I barely managed to become presentable.
It's 4:30 for you, 5:30. Surely not.
I was in Korea day before yesterday. I am so jet lagged. It's not even funny, because Korea for me was a 16-hour time zone transition, which basically means you can't transition in less than 2 weeks. And I was only there for 4 days. So all I did was just massively disrupt my sleep cycle for 5 days. And now it's going to take me another 5 days to recover.
If this is you jet lagged, Wow.
I just returned yesterday, actually the day before, from Italy. So I had a 7-hour difference, not nearly 16, but I do appreciate that how drunk you feel. At least I've been feeling I've been waking up at extraordinary hours of the night going, right, I think I'll read. And then wanting to crash out.
Fortunately, Bitcoin is a topic that I've internalized so well and I do so often, and the interviews are so intense, and I do them again and again and again. My interview schedule is crazy that I could do this drunk, as I've just proven. Jet-like drunk, not deliberately, but still. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Lots of love, and we talk to you again.
Bye-bye.
Would you buy the Kardashian coin?
Well, no, I don't know. I don't think I would.
There's heaps of famous people who would come out with a coin, I reckon. Because they could make a fortune, really. I mean, the Kardashians, because they're Kardashians, if they came out with a Kardashian coin, they'd have like 100,000. If they sold it for like $1 per coin, they would have at least 100,000 people buy at least one. That make a killing.
Well, at least if they did something like that and then they borrowed all the money into somebody like Dr. Alison Thompson's work, then that would be okay, because it would be them using their fame to make money in an honest way in order to be able to channel it into something really meaningful and useful and helpful for humanity. But, you know, I hate talking about it, but the Libra coin, I was reading about it just this morning, and it was paraphrased as these corporations basically treating themselves as a bank and saying, okay, well, we're just going to make money. We've sucked all the data out of you guys. Now we're going to suck some more money out of you. And people that I know, like, trust, respect, are saying, well, I'm going to grab some Libra coin because it's going to give me discounts on things I use in everyday life. It's going to be here anyway, so you may as well just make the best of it. It's right up there with Ripple, isn't it?
You know, you're probably not going to want to be associated with Donald Trump, Abiti. But he tweeted that basically he said, I'm not a fan of Bitcoin and any other cryptocurrencies, which are not money and whose value is highly volatile and unregulated. And then he said, similarly, Facebook, Libra's virtual currency, will have little standing or dependability. If Facebook and other companies want to become a bank, they must seek a new banking charter and become subject to all banking regulations, just like other banks.
Yeah, I actually screenshotted that because I retweeted it and said something like, oh, aren't you talking about the US dollar there? You know, when he was talking about how Bitcoin was for dodgy deals and sleazy things, and I was just like, "Oh God, you're such a dreamer."
It was so good. He said, when he was talking about the US dollar, he said it is by far the most dominant currency anywhere in the world, and it will always stay that way. It is called the United States dollar.
Oh, but Amy Rose, we know that he's just talking about the size of his penis again. I mean, that's all it ever comes down to.
Then I think any publicity for Bitcoin is good publicity.
Yeah, exactly.
So exactly. He's talking Bitcoin, he's talking cryptocurrency, and in this series of tweets, he talks about the Facebook coin. So I'm pretty sure he's got another agenda, and I know that I'm diving deep, but I'm pretty sure he loves crypto.
Yeah, well, there'll be the Donald Trumped coin.
Exactly, and no one will buy it. Yeah, they'll dump it. They'll dump the Trump.
He'll have shares in orange hair colouring.
Is his hair orange? I thought it was.
Don't talk about it anymore. We're giving him far too much airtime.
Yeah.
All right, my love. Well, thank you for the wonderful chat with Andreas Antonopoulos. It was a wonderful experience. Also, because we had issues with our international timing. Do you remember? So
no, I don't remember. Did we?
You were texting me going, quick, Andreas is on the line. I'm like, what? And it's like 7:00 in the morning, and I'm in my pajamas. And Andreas goes, well, are we on camera? And I'm like, no, because I'm in my gym jams. No, we're not. And I said, we were actually supposed to meet you at this time. And he's going, but hang on, my receptionist has got it organized. My assistant has got it organized at this time. And so it was just one of those, burps in the face of humanity when we just didn't quite get our timing right. But you had to drop your little guy at childcare, and then you sped home, not breaking any speeding records, I'm sure.
No, not me.
To jump on the call. So it was
I cannot even remember that.
Oh, seriously? No, it was great. I was sitting there in my gym jams chatting away to Andreas going, this feels very surreal, waiting for you to join us. So it was pretty cute. No. Another day in the life of a podcaster, hey?
Yeah, and I'm not that good at times, so I'm surprised that you had to rush as well because, my God.
Well, because you're 2 hours ahead of me, you'd got the email saying he'll be on in 30 minutes. And you were like, oh, hang on, I thought it was at this time. And I said, it was supposed to be at that time. Anyway, it was all fine. We all synced.
Yeah.
All right, darling, well, be well and we shall talk soon.
Cheerio.
Crypto Clothesline.